KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum of payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
Welcome back to another edition of the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Today, we're going to be talking about Asian films. With the San Diego Asian Film Festival coming up, I have here Brian Hu, who is the artistic director of the festival and has been for a few years now. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me back.
I want people to get a little sense of how much work goes into putting a film festival together, because even if they're not in San Diego and they can't come to this film festival, I think they need to appreciate the kind of effort that goes into this. So first off, this year, what were you looking at in terms of the kind of numbers of entries you had to screen and from how many countries?
Well, we had more entries this year than ever. So I don't even know, several hundred, which is actually obviously less than a Sundance or a big international film festival, but for a team as small as ours, it was pretty daunting. And we're noticing that more and more student filmmakers from all over Asia know about our film festival, so they're submitting their thesis films. And so it's a lot to sort through, but for us, it's thrilling because we get to see what are the new emerging voices in all these countries that maybe we hadn't even heard of before. And the number of filmmakers from Sri Lanka and Nepal just knocking on our doors, where before we didn't even know that they were making short films, or at least not to this caliber. So we find a lot of very personal films, films about growing up, films about their families, and there's a heart to them that sometimes you don't see when you're bankrolled by a studio, and those are the ones that we end up taking. And it really doesn't matter what university it is necessarily. We got one short this year called Death in a Day from a university that we usually don't get very good submissions from, and it completely wowed us. So student films are really where we get the best sense of discovery, and that these are filmmakers that have not even emerged yet, and we want to kind of take their hand and say, we believe in you.
Well, of course, the exciting thing about doing something like that is that you are looking to maybe 5 or 10 years down the road where these filmmakers, where you showcase their first work, suddenly spring onto the global market in a different way with something bigger or more exciting.
Yeah, and that's happened this year. So my first year as artistic director of the San Diego Asian Film Festival was in 2011, and we played a short film. It was about 5 minutes long. It was called Andy. It was made by a filmmaker named Andrew Ahn at CalArts. It ended up winning our Best Narrative Short Award, and he wasn't very well known at the time. This year, he released his first narrative feature film, and it played Sundance. It won Best Actor at Sundance. He's winning awards at pretty much every festival he's going to. It's been released in theaters in New York, San Francisco, and LA. And it's called Spa Night. And he's coming back to our festival this year with a completely different kind of cachet. And it's not that we take credit for discovering him or anything, but we like to every year he comes back and we just see his progress, and it only means that we're that much more excited about his next film.
That must feel good.
It feels great, and I hope it feels great for him too.
Now, when you're looking at all these films from all over the world, what are you looking for in a film? What do you feel a film needs to have for you to showcase it? And are there kind of different things you're looking for different tracks of programming? Yeah,
definitely. Well, the sort of generic one-size-fits-all answer I give is I just want to see something I haven't seen before. And that's different depending on the genre, depending on what kind of sensibility you're looking for. And also different because that for our film festival, which is specific for Asian cinema, we're also thinking about how do these films expand our ideas of what Asianness can mean here in the United States, especially this year where there's so much talk about diversity in the media. What is the role of our film festival in kind of exploding our ideas and stereotypes of what Asians on screen looks like? And the films that get made in Asia make this very easy for us because they're constantly wowing us with new kinds of characters, situations, exploding expectations. And so if the expectations on, say, a genre film are that they follow a certain kind of formula, we're looking for the ones that may tweak those formulas a little bit. Or films by new directors who have new ideas about what film form looks like or what style can be, what film pacing or use of acting can be. And so if they're really pushing the boundaries on those, we're very interested in those kind of films too. But also, like I said, just films that we look at it, in many ways it looks very familiar. It's just a romantic comedy, but there are Asian faces on them. And for us, we see the value of that, especially given the kind of climate of how we talk about diversity here in the United States. We should make a space for those kind of films as well.
You're entering your 17th year here. I've seen this festival grow and expand since its first year. And one of the things I've noticed, which for me as a film critic is really interesting, is those early years, it seemed to be a very strong focus on a lot of Asian American films where identity, a search for identity, was kind of forefront in what the films were. And although a lot of those were great, it's nice to see that there are a lot of films playing where the issue of identity is not the core issue, that we are watching films that are just artistically great or that go into a genre in interesting ways. And I find it really exciting that we're finally kind of getting to this point in a couple of our different festivals too, where you're getting to see that kind of diversity.
I think it's liberating that these filmmakers don't have to be just so obsessed with who am I? Am I stuck between the East and the West? These are such problematic ways of thinking about self to begin with, I think. And filmmakers realize that. And they just want to make films that either tell stories, and Asianness may or may not be at the forefront of those kind of stories. And they're just not, they're in many ways, they showcase that there's complexity of emotion and difficulty and humor that go beyond just who am I. And I hope I'm glad that you picked that up, because it's not just that we want to expand the genre of Asian American cinema. It's also that the filmmakers themselves realize that we're a little tired of just those same movies over and over.
When Justin Lin made Better Luck Tomorrow, I remember that caused a big stir because he was depicting some Asian American characters who were not role models, who were not necessarily positive images of Asians. And to me, as someone, I'm part Asian, I'm also female, what I want to see on screen are just complex, real characters that are interesting. And that was, for me, that seemed like a big step.
Yeah, it's funny. That film came out in 2002, and how scared a lot of people in the Asian American community was, which was, you're making us look bad.
You know this is all bullshit, right? It's just a game. People like you and me, we don't have to play by the rules. We can make our own.
Our straight A's were our alibi.
Tokyo, Japan.
As long as our grades were there, we were trusted. Besides, it was suburbia. We had nothing better to do.
When you look at our lineup this year, there are a lot of films that are all about making us look bad, and we're proud of it. In fact, there's a film we have called Bad Rap about Asian Americans who want to be rappers.
Out of 100 rappers, there's like 5 Asian American rappers.
There aren't many Asian rappers doing it.
You'll hear Asian rappers that sound Asian.
What's this whole business about sounding black?
Dude, it's so frustrating. Aquafina has a booking agent. I've been trying to do that for like the last 5 years.
A cute Asian girl who has like catchy hipster songs, like you know how to sell that.
It's like the hip-hop elitists that want to tear me down because like they're not used to seeing a little diminutive Asian girl.
There's nothing better than being underestimated.
You never see an Asian that's really being innovative ever complain about how unfair it is.
Like I'm Superman. I'm not just a rapper, I'm an activist.
They expect us to be that amount of minorities.
We need that champion. We need to be better than everybody.
I don't think that I'm a spokesperson for Asian Americans at all, but I think that when I'm out there, I'm representing them.
Fuck stereotype, fuck what you expect. This is who I am.
Mama had a dream, but she gave it up for me.
East Coast, West Coast, male, female, who they're very irreverent. They curse constantly. they do drugs, and there's no controversy over this. It's just because this is what expression looks like, and when you're free from having to quote unquote represent your community, you're free to be yourself, and that's when I think great art emerges.
Yes, and for me, like I said, it's really exciting from a film critic's point of view because I'm looking for films that are breaking boundaries and pushing the envelope, and those are the exciting kind of films for me to see. And you have a few this year You've had a few every year for a while now, but there are a few this year that really do push boundaries in interesting ways. And of course, one filmmaker who does this brilliantly so often is Sion Sono. And you have one that even the title is likely to provoke people, and it's called Anti-Porno.
I'm so glad you mentioned this one. Well, Sion Sono, for those who don't know, he's one of the bad boys of world cinema. Nothing's off limits for him, whether in terms of theme, but also in style. Like he really breaks apart genres. And this film is called Anti-Porno. In interviews, he's talked about how he doesn't really like pornography, yet he was approached by a studio called Nikatsu, which is this legendary Japanese studio that's famous for making just twisted film noirs and other things in the glory days of Japanese cinema. In the 1970s, Nikatsu realized that they were losing a lot of their market share. They were kind of declining. So they made a sort of a desperate move, which was to move into softcore pornography, which became a genre now known as the pinku film in Japan. And they told their filmmakers, as long as your film is under 80 minutes, you can shoot it in a week, and there's a sex scene every 10 minutes, we'll let you do anything you want. And a lot of the great directors of today, like Kiyoshi Kurosawa, they came out of that tradition where their artistic instincts were like they were allowed to blossom. I mean, they're very small requirements or minor requirements, even more so than for other genres. And it became a hotbed for conversation about what is art on film. So Nikatsu decided to reboot that this year. And they invited a bunch of premier Japanese directors, including Sion Sono, to try out the formula. And he made a film called Anti-Porno that in some ways is a critique of porno, but it's bigger than that. It's stranger than that. I think it would be too easy for us to do sort of an anti-porn a statement. And instead, he made a film that is about what it's the headspace of somebody kind of in that world, and the plays of power and manipulation between performers and those behind the scenes. I can't say too much more about it, the film, because it's kind of hard to explain. You just have to experience it. So there's that film called Anti-Porno, and then we have another film within that commission series from Nikatsu called Wet Woman in the Wind, which is kind of a Skinamax movie, but it's done with a joy for life that I think is unusual and that kind of won us over.
Well, I want to return to Anti-Porno just briefly because here in San Diego at the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, they screened Tag, which was another Sion Sono film. And what's interesting about both of these films is there's this kind of perverse feminist perspective in both of them, even though there's this extreme nature to both. The Tag was extremely violent. Practically the opening scene is some bizarre force that slices through a school bus full of Japanese schoolgirls and cuts them in half. With their bodies flying everywhere, and yet it still somehow manages to go from there to making a feminist statement. And Anti-Porno is really deep inside the psyche of a couple of these female characters who kind of play this role-changing game within the film.
Yeah, definitely perverse. And what Sono does so well is balance that sense of, I want this to be a feminist perspective, but also tease us with the possibility that maybe we're not supposed to be watching this either. That maybe we are voyeurs here, and maybe our gaze is undermining some of the feminism, but so it's never quite that easy for him. And therefore, it's easy to maybe critique him and say, like, maybe this is actually not as progressive, maybe this is regressive, but who knows? He doesn't want to give us any easy answers, but he wants to push every button or slice every button, and with Anti-Porno, he definitely does that.
Well, that's what's great about his films is it really does challenge the viewer. He doesn't spoon feed you anything, and he doesn't tell you what his point of view is in a very overt sort of way. So you're left there, which a lot of viewers don't tend to like. They don't like to have to make the decisions for themselves. But it's a challenging film where it makes you think about all those things you talked about.
Yeah, his films are hard to pinpoint ideologically. You don't really leave his films as you do maybe some special interest documentary, and you think, now I know how to feel about his subject.
Yeah.
After watching anti-porno, you definitely have no idea what to think about pornography, if indeed that is what his object of critique was. And you're not really sure how to think about those in that profession, whether in front or behind the camera. But you just enter this crazy headspace, and you experience it for yourself, and you see a twisted version on how we could look at a pornography set. And we're left to wonder. And we continue to wonder. And that film continues to haunt me in a strange way.
When you're programming, do you worry about programming films that will please the audience? Or are you also looking to program some films that you know are going to provoke your audience and maybe even have some walkouts?
Yeah. In an abstract sense, I want every movie to please everybody. But a lot of people don't realize that feeling repulsed can be a kind of pleasure. So that's one thing to kind of have to get over. And I understand that not everybody wants to go there necessarily. And so my challenge is trying to find the right audience for the right films. And once you get to that point, then you're free to play all kinds of different kinds of movies. If you're trying to make every film please everybody, then you're going to have a very safe and boring film festival. And in that case, why don't we just watch films at the AMC theaters? So I am very much thinking about the boundaries, not only the boundaries, like how much further I can push things. And playing two films that are kind of softcore porn for this year was something that when I decided to do that, I really wanted to embrace it, and I wanted people talking about this and thinking about the fact that when we think about what are the important genres to Asian cinema, the genres that don't really exist anywhere else. So our closing night film is about the samurai film or martial arts films or Bollywood. The Pinku film is really like historically a very significant genre in Japanese cinema. So for the sense of taste or to protect issues of taste, we could just pretend it doesn't exist. Or we could think about it historically and think about it artistically. Maybe story is important here, or characters are important, or what are in characters' minds, which in most pornography is just a blank thing that we don't want to. It's there just to say that we have a story, or just to say we have characters until we get to the action. Whereas in the two films that we're showing, it's all about character. It's really all about what the characters are thinking or not thinking, and it's about power. And how sex becomes a way of administering power. And if you think about it that way, then sex is just like there are action scenes in martial arts films or a dance number in a musical. So I think that I'm guessing a lot of our audiences have some familiarity with pornography as a genre, and just to think about how this is different.
You brought up samurai as another genre that you want to look at, and one of the films you have is a documentary about Toshiro Mifune. For most Americans, they may identify him with The Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa's great film. So tell me about this documentary.
Yeah, it's a wonderful documentary. And for those who are fans of Mifune and Kurosawa, this is a dream. Just to be able to find out a little bit more about his backstory. I didn't know that he never wanted to be an actor. He was in the military, and he just kind of stumbled upon this and then kind of changed the face of world cinema, and what I like about this documentary is that most documentaries about movie stars are about stardom, and they're about kind of cultural impact, as opposed to really thinking about acting as a craft. And in this film, you find out about his movements in front of the camera and how an actor's movements of their body alter like how we think about character. And then there's great interviews with Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg, who have eyes for acting and talking about what made Mifune unique as a performer, as well as interviews with his co-stars and contemporary Japanese actors reflecting on what made Mifune as an actor so unique. So for me, who I'm familiar with a lot of Kurosawa's films, but now that I know a little bit more, I have a better eye for Mifune as an actor, I feel like I want to revisit those Kurosawa films. And for those people who don't know who Kurosawa is, first of all, you have a lot of homework to do. But a film like this will definitely pique your interest, and it'll seek you out. It wants you to seek out titles beyond Seven Samurai. And the filmmakers, I know, went to extra lengths to make sure that they got all the clips in the film or all the new high definition remastered clips. And Mifune has never seemed so immediate and contemporary as he does in this documentary.
And another thing about that is that Mifune and Kurosawa had such a great collaborative relationship as an actor and a director, which we don't see all that often. But you mentioned that Scorsese's in that, and he and De Niro have that kind of interaction as well. So it must be interesting to see that kind of angle examined too.
And it's especially interesting seeing Scorsese talk about it because, sadly, the two people who aren't in the film to talk about their relationship are Mifune and Kurosawa because they both have passed away. So we never really get a sense of what their working relationship was exactly because, and that remains a mystery. And it's mysterious even for fans because fans know that they had a falling out at some point. And the documentary doesn't really quite give us everything we need to know about what happened there. The film is called Mifune, but it really should be called Mifune and Kurosawa because they go hand in hand. And so much of what we think about as the contributions of films like Seven Samurai and High and Low are really the collaboration between the two of them.
Now, samurai is a genre of films that is fascinating. It's an action genre, which a lot of Asian films do tend to fall into. And you have one that I'm very interested in seeing on a big screen, which is Call of Heroes.
乜你仲相信呢個世界上有正義同埋公理嘅咩？
信，但係信唔夠㗎，冇人執行，有咩公義啊？
And the reason I'm interested is that the action choreographer, the action director in this is Sammo Hung, who is a legendary figure in action cinema. And this film did kind of harken back to the old school days of action cinema when Jackie Chan was at his peak.
Yeah, this is a total throwback. And even the story almost seems like it can come out of The Seven Samurai or something, or just like a small town that is being victimized by an evil warlord type, and they need to stand up for themselves. And yeah, Sammo Hung, he's just old reliable. But he's found that the action performers in here are excellent, and there are just these set pieces in the film that are so memorable. And I'm the same way. I can't wait to see that on the big screen, as it should be seen. There's a certain scale to some of these action scenes, including one that's on a mount, like a hill of things I don't want to really talk about too much before people watch it. But yeah, just the inventiveness and a sense that, like, I think a lot of Hong Kong action films recently, there seems to be a stasis. Like they've stopped really trying to be creative about what can go into an action scene. And I don't think Call of Heroes is revolutionary, but it definitely reminded me of what Hong Kong cinema used to be.
Well, I think I had interviewed Jackie Chan about this, and the point he made is that when you're doing an action scene in a Hong Kong film, it's like everything in the scene is potentially active. The props, even the room itself, the space, whatever it is, becomes an element or a character in that action scene.
Yeah, and people often criticize Hong Kong cinema for sort of making it up as they go along. Like they show up on set and they don't even know what they're doing yet, and then they kind of, out of thin air, figure out elaborate choreography and dialogue. But I think what you're speaking to is the fact that if you didn't plan it, that means when you arrive, you look at everything. Mm-hmm. You didn't plan for that prop to be there, but you see it now that you have to come up with something. So everything is fair game. And it's that sense of off the seat of your pants, we're all underdogs here. Let's just make something. Yeah, anything goes. And it's that spirit that we don't see in a lot of other countries.
Well, people don't criticize Robert Altman for improvising on his set. Why should Sammo Hung get any flack for improvising an action scene?
Yeah.
But what I liked about the film was that it really did harken back to those 80s action films in a lot of respects where there's great comedy followed by like really horrific violence or brutality at times. I mean, those old Hong Kong films, the thing that I loved about them so much is that they could just change on a dime in terms of where they were pulling or pushing your emotions to. And it was fun to see a film where you didn't know what to expect because you didn't have that formula of like, oh, okay, well, the good guy's going to do this and the bad guy's going to do that, and we can be comfortable in this formula.
And I think a lot of that comes from the actors who, even when they're not fighting, they switch extremes of to such an extent that you really don't know how they're going to treat you next. I mean, the villain in this movie he's out of control and even beyond the expectations of those who know he's evil in this movie. And yeah, so yeah, even in terms of degrees of villainy, it can switch from moderately evil to deranged very quickly.
And I also had a hard time keeping up with the subtitles like I remember from the 80s. I'm going like, wait, it's too fast.
Yeah.
We mentioned Kurosawa. There's another Kurosawa at your festival who's a younger, not related to Akira, but Kiyoshi Kurosawa has a film here. He's a fascinating director who does a lot of films that seem to be more motivated kind of by mood and style than necessarily like really a hard plot that you're engaged by. Tell me about his new film. This is Creepy?
Creepy, yeah. Yeah, so like a lot of his films, this is one that a lot of it happens in people's heads. And the film is stylized in a way that reflects that. And he likes to play with genres, and he likes to make you feel like you're in a certain genre, but you're sometimes not sure. And some of his more famous examples are like Tokyo Sonata, when you feel like you're in a domestic melodrama, but there might be an undercurrent here. And in Creepy, you feel like you're just in suburbia, but there's an undercurrent. And he does that through style and through playing around with genres. And he's done this with detective films, with horror films, with domestic drama, and this. And yeah, this is another like just a domestic film that kind of explodes and has you feeling like, I don't know what movie I'm in.
Well, there are moments, I think there were a couple of scenes where, there was one scene I remember when it's a frame where the couple has just come up to a home to deliver a welcome gift or we're new in the neighborhood, hi, and nobody answers the door, and they walk away, and it holds just for a little bit longer than you expect on the porch, and the wind blows through, and you're watching it and you're going, why do I feel tense and anxious about this shot? But there's something here that is disquieting.
Yeah, and that's a great way of describing what Kurosawa is, or what he's great at. Some people find his film slow because it's not every moment is punctuated by action, but instead he wants you to wonder about the world that we're in. And what a great way, but what better way to do that than to hold the camera a little bit longer? It's a technique that a lot of filmmakers in Asia have excelled at, including martial arts directors, actually. But what Kurosawa's done is he likes to hold things on a disquieting emptiness, because I think for us as an audience, if we anticipate action, there's nothing worse than not getting the action because you don't know when it's going to happen.
Well, a different kind of action comes from a Korean film called Train to Busan.
맨날 다음이라고만 하고.
아빠는 안 보고 있는 것 같으면서도 다 보고 있다, 수환이.
This is a film that actually played very briefly, if you blinked you missed it, here in San Diego. Why is it important to bring back a film that did get some kind of theatrical release here in San Diego?
When I first arrived here at the San Diego Asian Film Festival, my policy was I don't want to play a film that's already open in theaters, that everything needs to be a San Diego premiere. And I still see the merits of that, but the landscape of cinema has changed, and of distribution has changed so much that a lot of films are now being released what's called day and date, which is if it comes out in Korea on a certain weekend, it's going to come out the same weekend here in the United States. And for film fans, that's great because you don't have to wait for the American distributor to finally let it out. I'm sure you remember like back in the day when Miramax would hold on to films for years and we would never see it.
Yeah, Jackie Chan was getting younger because they released one film, it did well, and suddenly they go, oh, we have this whole library of his films. Let's start releasing them going backwards. And he was getting younger.
Right. And meanwhile, the hardcore fans are finding ways to find these movies in other channels. So these distributors are realizing, you know what, let's just release it when it comes out and not worry too much about if we've ramped up enough interest first. So what happens is they just release these films, even if they haven't ramped up interest. And so they don't do as extensive, perhaps, a way of engaging local film critics or doing serious advertising. And as a result, those who end up seeing it are those who knew about its Asian release. So basically just people who read Korean newspapers. They all flock to the film. And at the AMC theaters here, it's almost like every week there's a Korean film. And it's like the best kept secret in town. The way that Bollywood films are as well. And so for us, I wanted to start bending the rules this year because there are so many people here in San Diego who did not get a chance to see this film until it was too late. By the time Train to Busan became kind of a cult item in the United States, it was already out of theaters. So, and a film like Train to Busan needs to be seen on the big screen. So I watched it first at its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, and I was sitting with 2,000 screaming French people, and it was one of the best experiences I had in a theater all year. And I want to replicate that here. And the movie is not the same watching it by yourself on Netflix. So I want to start bending the rules. Train to Busan isn't the only film like this that we're showing. We're also showing a Johnny To film called 3, which was another blink and you missed it release here in San Diego. Stephen Chow's The Mermaid, which got a release here. These films deserve to be seen more widely. And with films that have been released commercially, I will hold them to a higher standard. Like it needs to be that good for me to bend the rules. And these ones are.
Well, to get back to Train to Busan, this is a Korean film. And for me, the Korean films, these action films and some of the horror films too, one of the things they do so well, and I don't know why it seems so particular to them, is they make you care about these characters. You get engaged with them, you worry about them, you like them, and then they do horrific things to them and you feel torn apart. I don't know if it's just a perception, but I feel so much more emotionally engaged in a lot of these Korean action and horror films than I do for a lot of others.
Well, definitely, like Train to Busan, from the very beginning, it introduces the film to you as a movie about a father and a daughter who might not like him very much anymore. And really, at the end of the day, that's what it's committed to. And it wants to put these characters and their relationships to the biggest test that imaginable. Zombies. Yeah. And the filmmaker is somebody who, his other films that he's made, we've shown one of his animated films before. They're all twisted action films, but they're so cruel about showing how selfish people are, or how sometimes human instincts are very troubling. And so he comes from that kind of background. Meanwhile, in Korean cinema, there is a heightened melodrama that they don't shy away from. And so melodrama becomes this other channel for bringing out or making sure that our emotional investment in the characters are still there. So when there is an action scene, and Train to Busan is wall-to-wall action, once things start ramping up, it's nonstop action. The melodrama is still ever present about how am I not going to disappoint my daughter, and there are other characters in there. There's a married couple. There's some young lovers, and not being afraid of combining these two things. I actually love melodrama, and I love the roots of melodrama in American cinema. Back in in the silent days, they used to call westerns melodramas, and I think their melodramas and action films have a natural a point of intersection because they're all about the extremes of human experience. And in a film like Train to Busan, how action becomes the ultimate way of like trying to save one's family, and it could be so cruel, just like melodrama could be cruel, and it combines those with a lot of humor at the same time, and how it could switch so quickly from humor to atrocity, and how character can switch from a sweet grandma to, well, I don't want to say any more beyond that. The grandmas in this movie, yeah.
Well, the other thing I find about Asian action films, and I haven't really explored it in other countries, but I watch a lot of Asian action films, and it seems like the kind of action in terms of violence and things like that seem different in each country. So, in a Hong Kong film, the violence and the action has this flair to reflect kind of this cosmopolitan city that Hong Kong is. And in Japan, it seems to be about kind of breaking rules and about just bursting out and being kind of extreme. And in Korea, it seems to reflect the fact that this is a nation divided, and the violence and the action always seems to make you feel like you're so torn about two sides. And it seems like the most gut-wrenching of all the action films. And I mean, I've seen so many of them where I'm like close to tears in some of them, where I don't feel that way in a lot of the, like in Japanese action or, you know, Hong Kong action films.
Yeah, you're right. If we just pluck 10 minutes from an action scene from each of these places, you could probably immediately tell, without even hearing dialogue, like what tradition is it coming from. And I like what you say about the Japanese action films. And it seems to be like something repressed that needs to explode.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we have a film called Hime Anole, and it shocked me. And I've seen a lot of Japanese films. The first half of the movie is the sweetest romantic comedy of our film festival. In fact, I was watching it thinking, finally, this is the romantic comedy I've been waiting for, that I can show for audiences who are looking for a good date night movie. And then the credits come on. Like then the title card comes on. And the movie completely turns into probably the most violent movie in our film festival. And it's because they're beneath this desire to have cute love exists, or like first love or innocent love. It potentially exists something that needs to explode, or that we have tried to repress or pretend is not there, and at the end, we can't deny its existence anymore.
Yeah, that seems to be a definite theme that runs through a lot of these Japanese action films dating back for a while. And one of the people who's key in doing this is someone like Takeshi Miike, who, man, that stuff explodes too.
Yeah, I mean, his film Audition also begins as kind of something like a sweet romance. A sweet romance that you know there's something wrong about it, and then it tells you what's wrong about it.
Or there's just his absolutely start from over the top and go further over the top, kind of the Dead or Alive series or things like that, where he's insane, but I love him. You brought up Johnny To. He's one of my favorite directors, and yet his films seem like they should do better here in the United States, and yet I don't feel like he's ever really broken through to get some sort of mainstream recognition like some other directors have.
Yeah.
Tell me about you're showcasing two of his films. Tell me about them.
One of them is directed by Johnny To. It's called 3. And it's one of his leanest films. It's only 88 minutes or so. The entire film takes place in a hospital. And we've seen that in John Woo's Hard Boiled too, the things you can do in a hospital, especially when guns are involved. and Johnny To is just great, so good at orchestrating, even when there isn't action, the kinds of personalities involved. And he's got great characters who project whether they're characters who are suspicious or we're suspicious of them. He's able to project them so well and kind of throw different kind of characters at each other. And then he starts hiding guns in places. and it culminates in an action scene that I haven't quite seen before. It's stylistically. He shoots a scene in slow motion where he told his actors, we're not going to shoot this in slow motion. You are all going to move in slow motion. And it creates this strange, uncanny effect. So this is like Johnny To he's working within genres and working in very, very familiar genres, but yet he's still able to deliver images you've never seen before. So that's his film 3. And the other film is called Trevisa. He actually produced it. And what he did was he found 3 up-and-coming directors who have not made feature-length films yet. And each of those directors was responsible for one of the storylines, and Johnny To and his team find ways to interweave those 3 storylines. And so, for me, it's so great to see this movie because so often we think that Johnny To has been making films for 30 plus years. Stephen Chow has been making movies for 30 plus years. Wong Kar-wai as well. What is the new crop of directors in Hong Kong that's going to make us feel like Hong Kong is still one of the best industries in the world for film? And watching a film like this, you feel like there are new directors and they're in good hands.
All right, well, I'm glad you're showcasing him again. And you have shown some of his films in the past, too. You've been a good supporter of his, so thank you.
It's almost like a joke. It's not a San Diego Asian Film Festival without a Johnny To movie. And luckily, he makes so many movies, so we're able to do that every year.
And they're so good. And I love the way he twists genres. And he's done a few gangster films that have this kind of existential flavor to them that is unexpected, and I just adore it.
Yeah, all of his films are philosophical in some way.
In strange and interesting ways. You have some tributes going on this year as well. One person you're paying tribute to is Abbas Kiarostami, who passed away. What are you going to be showing to reflect on his career?
Yeah, well, he's left us so much to choose from. So the film we chose, we wanted to show one that we could find on 35 millimeter because he's such a photographic director that we wanted to be able to find something that's available on 35. So Taste of Cherry came immediately in mind because it's also about death. It's about somebody who's he is looking for a stranger to help him commit suicide. Basically, he's going around town saying, on this night, can you just come over by this tree and dump dirt in a hole? I will be there. And it's a shocking proposition that he makes to everybody who comes by his car. And it's about what do we as a society say in the face of death? When somebody's on the cusp of death, how do we reflect on that moment and how do we react to it? And in some ways, I feel like that's kind of the perfect way of thinking about losing someone like Kiarostami, who was such a major figure in world cinema for so long. And for those who have seen Taste of Cherry, you'll also know that it ends on a very strange coda. And I don't want to give it away. Well, even if I did, I don't think people. It's very hard to understand what's going on. But it's a coda that now that Kiarostami's gone, I think people look at it anew, and I want to give the audiences a chance to do so.
And you're also paying tribute to an Asian American director, Wayne Wang, who I remember seeing Chan is Missing when it first came out and thinking what a revelation that was. So how are you going to pay tribute to him?
Yeah, I mean, Chan is Missing. That film has been credited for kind of beginning Asian American cinema altogether. I mean, there were Asian American films before, very important ones, in fact, but that was the one that made everyone recognize and call it Asian American cinema.
Here's a game I play. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000.
Hey, what's a good place to eat in Chinatown?
Under 3 seconds. That question comes up under 3 seconds, 90% of the time. I usually give them my routine on the differences between Mandarin and Cantonese food and get a good tip.
And he's a filmmaker who has always been restless in style, in themes, in content. He's made films with Jennifer Lopez, Queen Latifah, Susan Sarandon, Gong Li, Beat Takeshi. And he's made kind of very, very mainstream films, but also defiantly independent films. When digital was first starting, he made films like Center of the World. And I love his restlessness because not only is he kind of, he doesn't want to be boxed in. From the very beginning, he didn't want to be known as an Asian American director. So he wanted to try to expand his repertoire. At the same time, he's always kept an eye on like what's important in the Chinese American community and how that is impacted by what's happening in China and Hong Kong. So we're showing a film of his called Eat a Bowl of Tea, which is one of his lesser-known films. It's from 1989, and it's about how because of the Chinese Exclusion Acts, a lot of the Chinatown communities weren't able to bring women into the United States, and therefore didn't have families. And it's about so right after the Chinese Exclusion Act ends, what are they going to do about it? And it's a comedy about finding a bride from China and what happens as a result. So it's got a historical dimension, a very important one, and it's still just incredibly enjoyable. And Wayne Wang actually has a new director's cut of it that hasn't been shown anywhere. So this will be the first time. So we're really excited to be giving him our Lifetime Achievement Award and for making films as diverse as Chan is Missing to Joy Luck Club to Made in Manhattan. And having a chance to show a film of his, seen the way he wants it to be seen and rediscovered.
And you're not only paying tribute to directors, but also to actors and some more recent actors, Randall Park.
Yeah, Randall Park. Oh, man. So for those of us, those who've been to our festival before, know how much we adore Randall. Since the early days of our festival, whenever we saw his name on a film submission, usually a short comedy, we knew we were in for something. And he has a certain kind of everyman charm at the same time that he's just doing odd, irreverent things. So, for instance, like he has a web series called The Food.
Ma'am, can I get you a box for your food?
No, you give me a box for my diarrhea. Fucking disgusting.
My grandmother's right. I'm very young, so I don't know much, but I know that this food tastes like gorilla pussy.
Come on, Zippy, let's go.
Oh, wait, where are you going?
We're going across street to P.F. Chang's for
real Chinese food.
Gather round.
Looks like we lost yet another customer to P.F. Chang's.
Fuck, why does everybody go there? Even I go there.
I do too. I just don't get it, man. I mean, just like them, we use all natural ingredients, like this tomato and this bell pepper.
Yeah, and we don't use MSG.
Where he plays a chef that is desperate to keep his people coming to his restaurant, so he finds a secret recipe, which is cocaine to just put in a chow mein, and he's playing on like sort of instead of MSG, I'm going to outdo MSG, and just like these kind of jokes that are kind of distasteful, but he's found a way just to be that aw shucks guy who just happens to do stuff like that. Another one of my favorite web series of his is called IKEA Heights, which is a soap opera set in IKEA.
Candy, I had that nightmare again.
The one where I poison you?
No, the one about my brother.
Oh, James. He's passed. There's no point in digging up old ghosts.
What good are ghosts if they don't haunt you?
Maybe you should go to work.
Yes, my dear. And you'll be keeping busy today?
I'm sure I'll find something to entertain me. After all, this is IKEA Heights.
But without the permission of IKEA. So the cast and crew just go into the showrooms where there are rooms set up, like there are living rooms, there are bedrooms, and they climb into bed, and then they act out these like ridiculous soap opera situations while shoppers are in the back trying to figure out what's going on. And every actor in the movie is just overdoing the role except for Randall. He looks like he has no idea why there are people staring at him, and he's like that into the character. So he's somebody who we just known for a long time as just the great comedian of Asian American cinema. And now that he's moved on to, he's in Veep. He had a famous cameo on the American version of The Office where he played Asian Jim. He's probably most famous in the United States for now. He's a dad on Fresh Off the Boat, and he played the North Korean dictator in The Interview. And as he becomes more mainstream, we're really happy for him, and he can pay the bills now. But we definitely miss the Randall that was the one that was going to lace our comedy with cocaine. So we're actually doing a retrospective, quote unquote retrospective, and he finds it hilarious that we're calling it a retrospective because he feels like he's done nothing to deserve it. But his old short films. So he'll be here to introduce a lot of them, and with a few surprises in between.
All right, while we're talking about comedy, I want to return to Stephen Chow. He is one of the funniest people on the planet. And you are going to be showing The Mermaid, which did have a brief release. What is it about Stephen Chow that makes him so entertaining on film? He is so great.
Well, he's a worldview. It's not just about being a clown on screen. When you enter a Stephen Chow world, you feel like there's a specific universe, and it helps that he has the same cast of supporting actors who are always in his movies. With him, it's also like this goofy sense of great physical comedy.
Yes.
He does things with his face and with other people's faces, and he's not afraid of bodies as sources of humor, even if it's what we can sometimes disparagingly call toilet humor. He just realizes that toilets are like any other prop, or like you just have to be creative with it. And he, in Cantonese, there's a term that describes his comedy, his very, very specific brand of comedy. I mean, I can't think of other comedians who have a word invented to describe what they do. And the translation is something like nonsense. But people use it to describe him knowing that it's not nonsense, that it's brilliance. But it's a brilliant version of something that in anybody else's hands would be just completely vacuous. Sometimes he does it to poke fun of things like romance, so often in his films, or with Shaolin soccer of competition. With this newest film, it's about the environment, and the beneath the film is this very deep concern for how real estate developments are taking over what is land or sea, and what are the potential human or non-human effects of that kind of ambition. And in this case, there are mer people whose lands are, or whose sea is being taken over by some crazy real estate developments. Why not poke fun of? We can just make a movie that's raising our picket signs, or we can make a movie that's showing the ludicrousness of everything to begin with. Stephen Chow knows how to use farce and to use farce as I think critique is giving him too much credit, but a way to shock us into seeing the world anew.
Well, what's interesting about him, too, is that he does this very physical comedy, which is almost Looney Tunes at time. And yet he's also a comedian who can be extremely verbal. And in a sense, like the physical comedy translates anywhere, but sometimes the verbal comedy is less easy to kind of cross over the ocean.
Yeah, so The Mermaid will definitely be a film where there are certain moments in there where half of the audience is laughing, the other half isn't, because there's some verbal jokes that I understand Mandarin and I can read the English subtitles, and I know that the English subtitles do not match or do not capture a certain flavor of the original, and that's definitely there. So for fans who understand Mandarin, they will have a great time. But for everyone else, like that physical comedy, and part of that also is he's one of the rare directors who has known how to use special effects, so digital effects, without it looking like a cheap imitation. And I think that Looney Tunes aspect is the fact that he knows it's kind of silly. He knows that digital effects can look silly. Let's really overdo that so that we can laugh with it and be in awe of the fantastical things we're seeing, but also know that this is all fun and games. And there's a scene here with the guy who is half man, half octopus, where tentacles and knives come into play, and it's gross. And this movie is rated R, but I think kids would love this movie the same way that they would love the Looney Tunes.
Yes, we talked about old school Hong Kong action, and you do something that's even further old school. In a sense, which is your mystery kung fu theater, which is one of my favorite components of the Asian Film Festival. And this is where we have to trust you. You don't tell us what the film is, but it's going to be something old, maybe kind of chop socky kind of film. And you bring these back, and they are so much fun. And you're programming this on election night.
And I've been thinking hard about like how I should approach this. I don't even know. It's still a mystery to me what I'm showing. I have some ideas. And so the question is, do I counter-program to election night? Or is anything that's just old school chopsocky Hong Kong, that I think that by nature is probably not what the opposite of what we're thinking about for election night. But I don't know. We're also, the metaphors we use to describe this year's election are ones that are not foreign to action movies, and I'm thinking about ways of shedding light, or just like kind of being able to at the end of the night on Tuesday to laugh a little bit and to kind of have a jolly time, but still I'm still trying to find ways to kind of nod to the fact that martial art films can also reflect the anxieties of today. We'll see.
And why do you have a commitment to keeping this mystery kung fu theater alive? What is it about these older kung fu action films that you feel people need to see on a big screen and appreciate?
Well, I mean, in the 1970s when they became a huge international sensation, I do believe that these were social events, that going to see a martial arts film, part of it is wanting to turn to your friend and say, did you see that? Did that really happen? Or to know, am I allowed to laugh during this? And if others are laughing, that, oh, okay, there's a community around this. So there's that. I wanted to maintain that social element. Also, a lot of people turn to our film festival because if they see the words Asian film, they think there must be martial arts. And if contemporary Asian filmmakers aren't making great martial art films, then I'm not going to show them. But I do know that a lot of great martial art films have been made in the past, so why not show them? Also, a lot of old martial art films have been recently remastered, but they are not available in the United States. So I'm going to find a sneaky way to make that happen. And lastly, I like that sense of mystery. And I mean, the mystery, I think, fits into the genre because a lot of these films evoke mystery. But also just the fact that kung fu films in the 1980s when they were on TV, you didn't know what was going to come up. You just knew the brand and you knew the time slot. And that's what we want to recreate. And it's a very nostalgic concept, I think. And what I'm finding is that, like the people who are in the audience, the ages range, including people who are too young to have known of any kind of kung fu phenomenon back in the 70s and 80s. And they're discovering these films for the first time. And it reminds me of the first time I discovered these films. And I think I don't want to deny anybody of that sense of discovery.
Well, and I think for a good chunk of people in the United States, their first introduction to quote-unquote Asian cinema was probably these kung fu movies that they caught on TV or, in a ethnic theater in some part of town.
Yeah, and I want them to know that there's art behind it too. And some of these films showcase so when I'm picking these films, I'm thinking about thematically, is there something relevant? Usually not. Usually I'm thinking about which films have the most grandiose sense of action, choreography, and performance. And a lot of the ones that I have shown, I would say, are some of the best martial art films that have been made that we don't know about, that aren't, starring Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan. So I'm also using this as a way to talk about, or to draw attention to the art of the martial arts film.
I love Mystery Kung Fu Theater. It's something I always look forward to. And I believe it was last year, you had a very interesting twist to Mystery Kung Fu Theater. You showed something on 16 millimeter and you had to jerry-rig a projector to do this in the theater. What can you tell us about these 16 millimeter films you have?
So, in the spirit of mystery, all I will say is I now own a very large collection of 16 millimeter prints from overseas. I don't know what most of them are. And some of them have come with movie posters, with synopses, so I get a sense of maybe what they're about. But if they're any good, I don't know. I know they have English subtitles. In fact, some of the 16mm prints have Spanish subtitles, and I wish to one day do something with those.
Partner with the Latino Film Festival.
Yeah. And so part of this is me just wanting to know what these films are. I don't have a 16mm projector at home. I wish I could find one, or I wish I could find some people who could just watch these movies with me and discover them with me. I mean, I'm not doing it blind. I do go online and I do a lot of research, often in Chinese, looking up what these films are in hopes that we can get some historical context and get a sense of whether anybody would want to watch these today. So at our spring showcase this year, I pulled out one of those titles where literally the only thing I found online about this movie was somebody in the discussion forum saying, "Has anybody seen this movie before?" Because I can't find it anywhere. And I knew I had to show this. And the movie was itself really special and kind of over the top, but we've seen that before. The texture of and the shakiness of 16 millimeter. And we showed it on one of the biggest screens in San Diego. And you're right, we jerry-rigged a projector. Our theater now, the UltraStar Mission Valley, it doesn't have 35 millimeter projectors, let alone 16 millimeter. But we found some lenses up there that we used to make it anamorphic, and my projection hero John Miller found a way to take us back to the early '80s with this movie that we showed, and I hope to dive back into that trove again. It's not going to happen for this year's festival, but you never know about the future.
I'll cry a little tear for that. But that was a fabulous experience. And that's what Mystery Kung Fu Theater really for me is so much about. It's about going in there, putting our faith in you, not knowing what we're going to get, but sometimes getting these absolutely amazing things. And you let us go up to the projection booth after just to see what John had rigged up in there. And that just added to the level of excitement and appreciation for that film.
But John did so much work to make this happen. And I want people to realize that, this it's not just about watching movies. It's about celebrating all that go into making the film experience so wonderful. So that's obviously the filmmakers, but we should never take for granted that we have all these films, but how are we even able to watch them? So when someone like John is able to build that from scratch, we should celebrate that. And to me, that goes to show that a film festival is more than just films. It should really be a festival too, a celebration of something. And in that moment when we all went to the projection booth, it was a celebration of, I think I call it heroism, and a sense of history, and celebrating the fact that we think that with the internet now that we have access to all of history, but sometimes it takes a little bit of ingenuity and sweat to really make history, to actually salvage history.
All right, I urge anyone who's in San Diego to make sure and check out Mystery Kung Fu Theater, because we can't talk about the titles. We can't tell you what we saw. It's a secret little community that's very insulated, and the only way to be a part of it is to actually come and see one of these films. So I highly recommend that. So before we close, is there anything else that you'd want to highlight from the festival, or anything that you want people to make sure they know about?
Well, there is one film that, so Johnny To is one of those directors where people joke it's not a San Diego Asian Film Festival if we don't have a Johnny To film. The other joke is that it's not a San Diego Asian Film Festival if we're not showing a 4-hour Filipino movie. And it's really just one director. His name is Lav Diaz. And his new film just won the Venice Film Festival, which is a big deal. It's, for him, this is a short film. It's only 3 hours and 48 minutes long. It's called The Woman Who Left. It's so new that we don't even have it in our brochure because we booked it at past deadline. But as soon as I saw it, I knew we had to play this. I've never seen a film quite like this before. It's very long, but the scenes are very long, and I love that. People don't realize that we've all been conditioned to watch scenes that are, 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes is very long, actually. His scenes can go on for 10, 15 minutes. This is a film, his movies are usually very austere. They're about politics, they're about history, they're about just the turmoil of the human psyche in the harshest of times. This one is practically a genre movie. It's about a woman who's been in prison for 30 years, and she's been wrongfully imprisoned, and she's finally let out. And then there's still 3.5 hours left of this movie. And for the entire film, like in Creepy, for the Kiyoshi Kurosawa film, there are these long scenes where you're not sure what's happening, and you're just waiting for action to happen. You're not sure if the length of these shots speak to the fact that this woman is now finding peace, or if she's concocting the ultimate revenge on those who have led her to be wrongfully imprisoned. And we go through this with her for 3.5 hours, and it is mesmerizing, it is terrifying, and it's powerful in a way that no other film in our festival is this year.
All right. Well, that seems like a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Brian, for coming out here. I hope that he has whetted your appetite to go see some Asian films.
I hope so, too.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. If listening to Cinema Junkie is becoming something of an addiction, please consider supporting the podcast at kpbs.org/feedthejunkie. And if you're looking for a cheaper way to support the show, just leave us a review the next time you're downloading an episode on iTunes. So, till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident Cinema Junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt or for home improvements by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Learn more at splatero.com.